Meetings were held on May 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, 2001 to review the experiments and analyses of the Oak Ridge Critical Experiments Facilities, ORCEF, over the period 1946 to 1974. Surviving participants in the activities were invited to present descriptions of facilities, equipment, and programs. The presentations were intended to serve as historical documentation and to give future experimenters useful information. Throughout the meetings, Dr. Mike Westfall served as Master of Ceremonies and moderator. Mike Westfall identifies the participants in the meeting and also introduces Alvin Weinberg, nuclear's leading pioneer, promoter, and philosopher. He served for many years as director of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Dr. Weinberg notes that Dr. Callahan was leader of the criticality program, and they discussed safety, including the Los Alamos accident that cost Louis Slotin his life. Callahan describes his interaction with Richard Feynman, and the group discusses personnel radiation exposure.
Okay, good morning. My name is Mike Westfall. I'm managing the Department of Energy's Nuclear Criticality Safety Program Technology Support work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And this morning it's my pleasure to open a heritage event which involves the experimentalists from the Oak Ridge Critical Experiments Program, which was conducted in the closing phases of the Manhattan Project through the era of the Atomic Energy Commission at the K-25 and Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Y-12. My first responsibility is to introduce Dr. Alvin Weinberg. Dr. Weinberg was technical director and then primarily director of the laboratory throughout most of this period. And Dr. Weinberg will introduce Dixon Callahan.
This session is devoted to the very early history of nuclear criticality experiments, starting in 1946. Dr. Dixon Callahan, the principal speaker for the session, is introduced by Dr. Alvin Weinberg. Callahan discusses the motivation for experiments and the first remotely controlled critical experiments.
I've known Dixon Callahan forever, although for part of that time he wasn't really part of the laboratory. He was, I think, part of K-25. But I would like to ask Dixon to clarify a couple of points. Can you hear me, Dixon?
Yes, sir.
To clarify a couple of points that I'm not very clear about. The first is, who on the Manhattan Project first realized that when you separate U-235 or get plutonium, you have to be careful that it doesn't chain react? Who was that? You know?
Honestly, I don't know.
My guess is that it was Edward Teller, but
Could well be. Oppenheimer had a hand in it, and Server. But I guess the most important name is Edward Teller.
well, Dick Feynman used to come. He was the liaison between Los Alamos and Oak Ridge. And did you interact with Dick Feynman at that time?
Honestly, no. My experience with Dick Feynman was almost limited to the following. In the fall of 46, 47, it was agreed that the uranium-235 materials that we had used at Los Alamos in the spring of 46 should come back to Oak Ridge to augment another batch that we had obtained in Oak Ridge. And so we commandeered Colonel Nichols B-25 and went out to Los Alamos on Friday the 13th of September of that year. Got things loaded up. We came back to Oak Ridge on Sunday, and the word got around that here's an airplane going to Oak Ridge. Anybody want to go? So Dick Feynman came in, and Paul Abelson, I guess. We filled up the space, and so I rode from Santa Fe to Knoxville with Dick Feynman. On the following day, he came down to the rather makeshift laboratory that we had prepared in the so-called S-50 area down near the power plant in K-25. And he looked over what we were planning and apparently approved it. There was no question.
You probably recall that Charlie Baker was his Alamos, came to what was still Clinton Laboratories to supervise critical experiments that were being done by none other than Arthur Snell. Does that ring a bell?
I never knew Mr. Baker, Dr. Baker. I know the name from those early days. Art did some wonderful experiments with what he had to work with, and
You were in contact with Art Snell at that time?
No, not really. The fences in Oak Ridge between the 3 and 4 installations were pretty high, and we didn't fraternize to any great extent.
Well, I needn't tell this group that the experiments that you conducted over these years and your colleagues were crucial to the whole business of nuclear energy. And the horrible incident in Japan of, what is it, a year and a half ago, shows how important what you were doing was. And I think all of us owe you a great debt for your having pioneered in this ever so important enterprise and shown the way. Now, some of you may not be aware that Dixon had several careers. In Oak Ridge, for example, he was very active with his first wife in the Oak Ridge Playhouse. Is that not correct?
We were the president.
Yes. And he also was, for many years, the guiding force and the editor-in-chief of Nuclear Science and Engineering, which was the first technical journal on nuclear matters. He also, I think you were a member of the Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards.
No, I never realized yet. I was an administrative judge with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission on licensing, but not
so that
on
was a higher,
no.
yeah.
Thank you.
Let me just mention one other thing that some of you may not be aware of. I spoke to Dixon last night. Had he ever met Louis Slotin? How many of you met Louis Slotin? He met him, and you met him. And Louis Slotin, you remember, was that Anthony Adverse character, go, go, go guy, which is sort of the wrong personality for doing critical experiments. And he was killed in a very tragic reactor accident in which he was using a screwdriver to shim the two halves of the bomb that he was testing. And there were about 8 other guys in the room, and he received about 2,500 Roentgens and died in 9 days. And Al Graves, who was supposed to take his place, was standing in back of him, and Louis grabbed the critical experiment and shielded Al Graves, so that Al Graves received only about 200 rads, and he lived a normal life and had a kid, a very normal kid, as a matter of fact. Well, the reason I mention this is, first, I guess that was the incident that really impressed on everybody the great necessity of doing these experiments with safety as the primary consideration. Well, that's not really an introduction, Dixon, but you don't need any introduction, so.
Thank you very much.
Dixon, how many Roentgens have you been exposed to during your lifetime?
I have no idea. And that's a number sufficiently significant to put me on an exposed list that I know of. I've never been informed.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that you look around this table and, well, you must be over 80. 81. He's certainly over 80.
93.
92. I'm 86. How about you?
I'm 81 this year.
Yeah.
It's coming
So,
up in a few days.
how about you, Red?
77.
77, a youngster.
How about Eric Lynn?
Who?
Lynn.
Dr.
That
Lynn?
big body burden.
Oh, yeah. Well, he died in a fishing
Right.
accident,
Yeah.
you know. But the reason I bring this up is because there's this huge argument that pervades the entire nuclear business, which has to do with the chronic effects of low levels of radiation. And I think that we supporters of nuclear energy have a responsibility to keep living so that we can be points that people point to and say, well, okay, you lived a pretty good life for 86 years. I'm talking about myself. And anything beyond that is gravy. But that supports the notion that these low, very low levels of radiation, which is the basic reason why people on the other side don't like nuclear energy, because it's the linear hypothesis and so on.
I attributed my really good health during the war years partly to fluorine. We used a lot of elemental fluorine. How do you get rid of it? We hooked it up to an aspirator on the water supply and flushed it down the sink. We probably dumped in at the same time some trichloroethylene. I think the combination is phosgene. Pardon my chemistry. But anyway, I and others had a significant exposure to elemental fluorine. And I think that's a great purifying agent. And for the whole series of events in the war years, I was disgustingly healthy. I remember being confined at home in New Jersey on VD Day. That kind of stands up. And the next time I was in a medical institution was in the mid-70s for some cataract operations. So as I say, in addition to the radiation, of which I'm a firm believer, we had fluoride to help us along. I have in my possession here at the moment a letter from someone from the Institute, which I have not responded to because I thought I could do it personally, and I plan to next week, inquiring about health and experience and so on over the years. How or why they picked me, I have the slightest idea. I don't know the person, but I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Well, my guess is that you probably averaged over the years maybe one Röntgen per year. As much as
I
that.
haven't any idea. We were carefully monitored, and so we sat back and waited to be told if we're anywhere near a threshold. And no one has ever mentioned that to me personally, or about me personally.
Well, even
When I retired, I got a notification of my sum total from the health physics department, but I've completely forgotten it. And I was just talking with Cleo's Cross, a technician who did all of my work for me. He's a wonderful man, technician, and we ought to honor the whole staff of the technicians that we had over my tenure there. He told me that he got only 13R as a total for his exposure, and he was working with 233 and did the work when we were doing 8.
that was over how many years?
Well, I don't know how long he worked there. When he retired, that's how many he had total.
Uh-huh.
He's been there a long time, probably well over 30 years. It's an integrated dose, quite typical of people who have to handle on a daily basis uranium.
Well, you can cite the isotope that the 232 isotope in 233 supplies emits a strong gamma ray.
I could say tell a little tale there that we had planned experiments with some carefully produced U-233 with a low 232 content. And it involved quite a number of kilograms. But apparently the Navy learned about it on a shipment, and they managed to have it diverted to their project that had nuclear fuels limited, is it?
I don't know who
Service,
was-
yeah.
I don't know
Nuclear
who's
fuel
doing it.
service give us some of the routine production, which had a high 232 content. And we tried our best to produce something useful, and to an extent it was, but the chemistry was difficult to meet limits that would make it sort of benchmark for today's effort. But that stuff was very radioactive. Cleo's did a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And I did some of it with him when I could.
Well, do you know what your total dose has been?
No, I guess they didn't want me to know because I didn't get one of them.
Well, I neglected to ask you, how old are you now?
I'm just 75.
Oh.
I'm still the youngster.
Yeah.
I hope.
No, here's a youngster right here.
Yeah, that's true. This guy is. Yes.
My total dose in my career here at Oak Ridge has been like 5R, 3.8 of which was acquired in the years we did the pulse reactor experiments.
Yes, I used to sit at my desk, he being the East Cell, East Cell, and Pulse's reactor. And on my desk, I had my personal monitor, and when it flashed, I'd say, "There goes John again." It would flash and pulse, and then a wave of neutrons would go by, and the device would flicker red. say, in general, we have more than a typical worker might require.
But nothing serious.
But in no manner can you say that it's serious.
Probably comparable to what transatlantic pilots get over a lifetime.
You'd be surprised, yes.
Yeah. Well, all of you know that nuclear energy is on the verge of a great rebirth. I hope I last long enough to see it happen.
I would like to return for a moment to Louis Slotin and say that he, under his large wing, took 3 or 4 very inexperienced and somewhat unknowledgeable Oak Ridgers, one of whom is sitting on my left, and myself. There have been some deaths in the group. But Louis taught us critical experiments. He was our mentor. This affair with the screwdriver and the plutonium halves was amazing to me because he was so cautious. But now I'm going to rebut that, perhaps even. We did these experiments in Tyrita Canyon, which is quite low elevation-wise with respect to Los Alamos town. And we quit for the day at 4 or 5 o'clock, and we had to drive up the hill to the west, so the sun was still setting behind the mountain. And he always cautioned us to be careful how we drove, so on. Yet on one occasion, when we had a near critical assembly, as Ray's going to tell us about, enclosed in paraffin, and Louis climbed up and sat on it and made it almost critical. So there's this contrast between his actions and his attitudes. So when I heard, and this was the end of May of '46, we were back east, and I read of the paper where he had been exposed and subsequently died. And it was so unlike him as we had experienced his actions and advice and so on. And it's a dilemma that I've never quite reconciled myself to.
There's a little more on that I've studied that situation a little bit. It is rumored that he was rather reckless and careless and a sort of a show-off. Now, we didn't see that when he was working with us, but he had that reputation. He was the one who assembled the Fat Man for the experiments at Alamogordo and for the Nagasaki. And it was said that he was very capable, but he was interested in a dangerous assignment. He loved danger. Now, all those things relate to this problem.
Well, there are 2 things about Louis Slotin that people know, or some people claim to know. One is that when he was at Oak Ridge, he was working on the water lattice experiments, the very first water lattice experiments. And on one occasion, something had dropped into the tank, and all these uranium rods were around there. I don't know what the level of radiation there was, but rather than laboriously fishing the thing out, he jumped in, took off his clothes and jumped in, and pulled it up just like that. The other thing that that I might mention is that now with it's 55 years since that, so it's possible to talk about things like this. The Russian